Welcome, everyone. I have the honor and pleasure here with Peter Young from the Free Cities Foundation. Peter, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Lee. Thanks for having me.
Maybe quick, who are you? What's your organization, Free Cities, doing, and why are you in Salvador?
So I work for the Free Cities Foundation. We're a not-for-profit organisation that's trying to give people more choice in governance. At the moment, if you look around the world, the models, the way in which we do governance, the standard operating procedure, is pretty similar. Every government raises their revenue through taxes, they have an inflationary currency, they sell bonds, they have certain services that tend to be provided by the state. And we think that that whole model needs to be shaken up, that people need to be given more choice. And so our foundation is dedicated to helping make that happen.
So the organization is non-profit,
That's right.
but the product that you're trying to develop, that will be also pro-profit, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, because we think that the best way that you deliver for people is to have price signals and a profit motive. So there are a whole range of different ways in which you can give people more choice in governance. You could kind of play around with the policy levers that we have in standard countries at the moment, or you can go to something called a free private city, which is a model proposed by the founder of our foundation, Titus Gable. And in that model, you have a for-profit operating company that manages an area of land and a citizen's contract. So every citizen, rather than having a hypothetical social contract where your rights are kind of intangible and vague, you have a real written contract that's backed up by the law. An important part of that is that there is an incentive through the profit motive for the operator to deliver the best so that they can get more citizens in and they can do well for their business.
Yep. So I think that might be actually, for me at least, it's a very important part of that idea. That's where I think it's almost like mind-blowing, right? Like, I think people, they understand this, they feel this, they know this, but they don't think about this much. Like normal people don't think about it. We take, government, like there's no way this could be different. Like you get born, and what do you get first without ever thinking about? Like a tax number, right? So you get born with a tax ID, and then eventually you figure out, like, in school it's all right, and university it's all right. Then you start working, and at least in the Western country, right? And then it's like suddenly, wow, a lot of, a lot of fee for the service that the government provides. So a lot of people maybe think about this, right? Like, is this a good deal? So, I'm interested, what's your motivation? What's your vision with this? So what is the big idea? Like, could you summarize it maybe shortly? What's really like the most motivating piece of this for you?
I don't really like the idea that countries are starting more and more to harmonize, what they call harmonize, which is make their policies the same. So no matter wherever you go, and even if you're someone that looks at, for example, the schooling system, and you say, this isn't really right for me and my family, you still have to pay to support the overall schooling system. And most countries have that as standard, but I think that there should be the option for people that want to do, to manage that area of their lives differently, to have different choices. The same with healthcare, the same with transport. So the vision that I have for the future is a vision where there's much more diversity in governance. There are more small jurisdictions that are implementing different policies. And I think that's good for everyone, because it means that the people that like the existing system can still stay within it and have it, but people that want to do things differently can move, and they have a variety of different options available to them.
Excellent. I think there's this book, the Seen Unseen, Unrealized, by, is it Per Bylund? Essentially, people have a hard time imagine a world that's different, right? Because we only see the things that we see.
Okay.
Could you maybe explain to someone that doesn't see the problem, like, what is the biggest problem that the government struggles with, or that citizens struggle with today?
I think one of the main problems is that because we have so many functions now performed by the government, there's kind of a popular narrative, which is that we live in this kind of crazily free market world where it's just corporations running amok and controlling everything. But actually, if you look at where we are today versus where we were 100 years ago in the Western world, then many, many more functions are performed by the state, We have money that is now completely controlled by the state through the issuance of government bonds and the purchase of those bonds by central banks. We have education provided by the state. We have medical care provided by the state. Often there's housing. There's often a range of like benefits, transfer payments. This is, comparing it to what we had going back in history, there is far, far more intervention than there used to be. And what this does is it kind of, because all these things are managed through one central monopoly provider, the government, people look and see that there are issues out there in society. But it's not like when, say you see an issue with your phone, you know that you have an option to choose a different phone provider. You can choose an Android phone rather than an Apple phone. Whereas with government, it's all provided together, and sometimes the issues that are created when things aren't working correctly, they kind of merge, and it's really hard to identify what needs to be done to bring about change. And so what I think we need to have is a system where we go back to having more of a voluntary service-based economy, and that will help people to realize what it is that's actually causing some of the problems that they identify, but perhaps don't understand how to rectify.
Right. I mean, so in short, to sum it up, instead of getting born and have an arbitrary tax ID and I can't opt out and I don't have a contract, I would sign up for my government, and I would only pay them for the service they provide, and I could choose, right? And I could easily opt out and even sue them, possibly with a much better chance of actually winning if I'm right and they're wrong, which is not the case today. So a lot of people, though, they believe if you have competition, what you proposed, it would not be good for them. Yeah. I guess because the monopolist today is very, very well prepared to guide and direct the narrative that if they produce a problem, they're not the one to blame. Like, it's always the free market that's to be blamed. But why is the solution better? Why do you think a free choice for governance is better for people? What's the benefit?
Because ultimately, free choice is the only way in which you empower people. If you just have a single provider of a certain kind of service and you say that everyone is forced to pay for that service, even if that service provider has the best of intentions, they just don't have the right signals. They don't know what to produce, and often they're trying to produce something where the assumption is that there's a one-size-fits-all solution, but in fact you need many different kinds of solution. An analogy might be a shoe company. Like, we have government provided by a single service provider, but imagine if we had shoes provided by a single service provider, and we all had to come together every 5 years and decide, this year, are we going to have size 8 shoes for the population or size 12 shoes for the population? Are we going to have red shoes or are we going to have black shoes? It assumes that there's some kind of objective answer to these questions, but the reality is we need black shoes, red shoes, green shoes, we need sizes from 2 through to 16. All of these things are provided voluntarily. And there's no reason fundamentally why government shouldn't be the same. But unfortunately, I think one of the problems that means that we don't tend to think very, very well about these questions is that humans just kind of haven't really evolved to think about how society functions on the scale of millions of people. We're used to functioning more. Going back in history, we would have functioned more in tribes of dozens of people. And so it is difficult to think about these questions and how markets can function in the abstract. But ultimately, what we should be doing is trying to provide people more choice. And that's the only way that we can civilize and that we can create networks that benefit everyone in society.
Yeah, I like the analogy with the shoes. Of course, we want different shoes, and I think that's where people could start become more creative and more open and have inspiration. So maybe you could share a little. What are the projects that your organization Free Cities is working on? There is already development, obviously, towards that direction. So maybe just share a little bit what's going on there.
So we work with projects ranging through to like highly autonomous areas of Honduras. So Prospera and Morazan are 2 projects, 2 zones for employment and economic development that we are in close contact with, and we support them. They just took part in our conference, and we help to raise awareness of what they're doing, because they're 2 very exciting projects that have a real focus on freedom and empowering the people that live within them. And then there are other projects like the New Hampshire Free State Project in the US, which is more of a kind of collective group of people that have come together to try and influence the political environment in that state of America. And then there are kind of what we call intentional communities, places like Liebestad in Norway. And we've just had a new project in Germany called Bürgergenossenschaft. They also showcased their project at our conference. And one other category would be seasteads, so people that are going directly outside of central government jurisdictions to uninhabited parts of the sea, because that offers a kind of unique regulatory environment where you can just start from a blank slate and create a new kind of society. So we work with everything across that spectrum that I've just described.
I guess it's incredibly hard to launch an actual free city. There obviously there's a status quo and forces that rather not have competition.
Yep.
And what's the key to success, and why do you believe, maybe like I ask you that way, like why is it inevitable that we will see at some point more competition in the space?
It's inevitable because people, one way or another, will just move to where they're treated best. People respond to incentives. And although in most nation states you have deep capital structures, you have buildings, you have people, talent, you have relationship networks, there's a lot that you can do to a society that might not be taking that society in the right direction before people start really moving away. But it will happen eventually, because there are always marginal cases. There are always people that see an opportunity living somewhere else, and the more you move things in the wrong direction, in the direction of coercion and monopoly control, I think you'll just see more people decide to opt out. And that's why I think eventually these models, these freer jurisdictions will take off in a really big way, because they're offering people choice and people respond to better options when they're available.
And we are here living proof. Essentially, we're in El Salvador. Behind us, the beautiful San Salvador volcano, and I think it's a case, right? I mean, a case for competition. So maybe from your perspective, what has El Salvador done right and different to attract foreigners, for example?
Well, the obvious thing is that it has adopted a freedom-based voluntary currency that any person can opt into, and there's a huge global community out there.
You can name it. What's it called?
There's a huge community of Bitcoiners out there that are very excited about these developments. But on top of that, El Salvador has also made it clear that they're welcoming foreigners to come here, to set up a life here. We heard last year at the Adopting Bitcoin conference an announcement about Bitcoin City over in the Gulf of Fonseca. And along with that, there was talk about some citizenship being offered to people through investment. And they've also made it very easy in terms of travel restrictions. At a time when a lot of the world was closing down due to COVID-19, El Salvador has been fairly open, and I think that has a lot of people have seen that and noticed that and come over here as a result. So El Salvador's giving the vibe, we're open for business, we welcome innovation, we welcome people with a freedom mindset, and I think so far that's been very positive for them.
You mentioned earlier you dislike the fact that it's harmonizing more and more, and everything is kind of the same, and there's no differentiation. Is there any other key pain that you experience, maybe, or one thing that you're really looking forward to be improved in when there's more diversity?
Yeah, to be honest, the thing that I would really look forward to, it's a bit abstract really, but it's more like how we manage like finances and business and accounting, because within our model, you treat your government a bit like you would treat the owner of your apartment block if you're renting an apartment. You have a contract which says you can't make noise after this time at night. You can't. So you have to respect, the local community. There are a few rules, and you pay a certain amount every month, but you don't have to report your income and all of your activities to your apartment owner. They say, this is the service you provide, this is how much it costs. And we basically would just do away with this huge amount of waste that there is regarding, accounting for things in a certain way, classifying certain things as business expenses or personal expenditures. That whole industry, I think, is so wasteful, when in fact all you're trying to do really is fund government, fund the public services that people want. So I think the best way of doing that is to kind of cut out the deadweight loss, and we would just kind of be much freer to focus on actually creating value and delivering things that other people want us to deliver, rather than kind of accounting and these bookkeeping relating things. So that's just one thing that I would point to that we would hopefully do well without in a world of free cities.
Definitely, I think there's a lot of, as in Austrian economics, we observe how much bad the central planning does and harms, and how much talent is also wasted, right? I mean, all these accounting industries, I mean, there's just people working for essentially like for nothing, because there is no added value coming out of this, right? So a lot of the young people, they seek to incorporate their businesses in jurisdiction where there is no accounts, right? Like for non-US residents, the US LLC and Dubai and others. So really looking forward to that. Wonderful. So Free Cities, maybe you could share your what are you doing? Like what does your work really look like, and what's on the roadmap for next year? What has happened this year? What do you recently rebranded? Maybe you could also touch a little bit on that.
Sure. So what we do is we raise awareness of Free Cities projects. We encourage settlers to move to them. We help investors to get into those projects, and we help to inspire people to create their own free cities, because ultimately our goal is to grow what we call the market of living together. We think that living together, governance, it should be a market like any other. So what that looks like in practice is that we spread the word. So we have an annual conference. We've just held that in Prague. It's called Liberty in Our Lifetime. And this is really the annual focal point where people come together to showcase their projects and find out about the broader liberty movement. So that's one thing. We're also about to launch a new podcast called the Free Cities Podcast, and that will tell the stories of people that are working on free cities in some way. We've just come from Prospera, where we've recorded about 8 episodes for that podcast. So that's another core pillar of what we're doing. And then we also have analysis that we create on what's happening in the free city space. So some people may have heard that there's been some political controversy around the Zones for Economic Development and Employment law in Honduras, which is quite an important law for the broader free cities movement, because it includes, it's the law that regulates, the regimes that Prospera, Morazan, Orquídea, these projects have. So we've done some in-depth analysis on that, telling those stories. So it's, writing articles, telling stories, running an annual conference, and then doing what we can to meet with governments and influence them to establish more autonomous zones that support our mission.
Awesome. Sounds really exciting. And what are you doing in El Salvador? What are you looking forward to explore here? Are you going up the volcano, or what else?
There's not going to be much time for sightseeing on this visit. The main purpose of us coming here is to take part in the Adopting Bitcoin conference. Our message is that if you're a Bitcoiner and you believe in freedom money, then you should also be interested in the broader freedom environment, how you create physical places that embody the values of Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is a network that anyone can opt into, but there are clearly defined rules. So no one's forced to be part of the Bitcoin rules and abide by the Bitcoin protocol, but anyone can if they want to. And that's kind of what free cities are. They're areas of land that have clearly defined rules based on voluntarism that people can opt into, but they don't force anyone to come to them. And for their existing residents, they don't impose rules or change the rules on people once they're actually moving there. So what our message is to, well, the reason we're here is to try and spread the word about this free cities concept, make the case that it's relevant to Bitcoiners, and hopefully inspire some people to go out there and create their own projects that align to the free cities ethos.
I mean, I bet that Bitcoiners are very open to the idea, and you already engage with the Bitcoin community. How is your experience with Bitcoiners? Are they very receptive to the idea?
My experience has been incredibly positive. We had a lot of Bitcoiners come to our recent conference in Prague. We've been interviewing our own Bitcoiners for our own podcast. We just had Stefan Rivera over in our Airbnb. We were talking to him about why he thinks there's this really strong link between free cities and Bitcoin. He's actually just published an article in Bitcoin Magazine on that topic. So broadly, it's been really encouraging. And actually, I came to Bitcoin before I became interested in free cities. I did, and I still do, work with Saifedean Ammous, the author of the Bitcoin Standard. So it was really through understanding Bitcoin and Austrian economics, like yourself, that I really started to look at kind of what my niche might be. And it was through that I realized that free cities were the thing.